The whispering winds of Kijiji village. In the heart of the African savanna, nestled between rolling hills and golden grasslands, lay the village of Kijiji. It was a place where the sun painted the earth in hues of amber, and the baobab trees stood like ancient sentinels, their branches stretching toward the heavens. The villagers lived simply, sharing what little they had, for they believed that kindness was the greatest wealth of all. But there was one man in Kijiji who did not share this belief. A wealthy merchant named Jabari. Jabari was known far and wide for his riches. His granaries overflowed with millet, his cattle were the fattest in the region, and his home was adorned with intricate carvings and colorful fabrics. Yet, despite his wealth, Jabari's heart was as hard as the stones that lined the riverbed. He hoarded his food, refusing to share even a single grain with those in need. Travelers passing through Kijiji often stopped at his door, hoping for a morsel to ease their hunger. But Jabari would turn them away with a sneer. "Why should I feed you?" he would say. "The world does not feed me. Go find your own way." The villagers whispered among themselves about Jabari's cruelty. "The gods will punish him," they said. "No one can defy the spirit of Ubuntu, the belief that we are all connected." But Jabari only laughed at their warnings. "The gods favor the strong," he declared, "and I am the strongest of all." One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned to a deep indigo, Jabari sat in his courtyard, feasting on a lavish meal. Roasted goat meat, freshly baked flatbread, and sweet mangoes filled his table. The aroma wafted through the air, teasing the empty stomachs of the villagers, who could only watch from a distance. Jabari ate greedily, savoring every bite, when suddenly a cool breeze swept through the courtyard. It was unusual, for the air had been still all day. The breeze grew stronger, carrying with it a faint whisper. "Jabari's," it called, soft and haunting. Jabari paused, his hand halfway to his mouth. He looked around, but there was no one there. Shaking his head, he continued eating. But the whisper came again, louder this time. "Jabari! Jabari!" The merchant stood up, his heart pounding. "Who's there?" he demanded, his voice trembling. The wind swirled around him, and the whispers grew into a chorus of voices. Voices of the hungry travelers he had turned away. "You denied us food," they said. "You turned your back on us when we needed you most." Jabari stumbled backward, knocking over his chair. The voices were everywhere, echoing in his ears, filling his mind. He clutched his head, trying to block them out, but they only grew louder. "You have forgotten the spirit of Ubuntu," the voices chanted. "You have forgotten that we are all one." Terrified, Jabari ran into his house and slammed the door shut. But the whispers followed him, seeping through the cracks in the walls, swirling around him like a storm. He crawled into his bed, pulling the blankets over his head, but there was no escape. The voices were inside him, a constant reminder of his greed. The next morning, Jabari awoke to a foul stench. He rushed to his courtyard and found his once delicious meal rotting before his eyes. The meat was covered in maggots, the bread moldy, and the mangoes shriveled and black. He gagged and turned away, but the stench followed him wherever he went. He opened his granaries, hoping to find fresh food, but the millet had turned to dust. His cattle, once plump and healthy, were now thin and weak, their ribs protruding like the bars of a cage. Panicked, Jabari ran to the village elder Mzikibwe, a wise man with a long white beard and eyes that seemed to see into the soul. "Help me," Jabari pleaded. "The spirits are punishing me. My food is rotting. My wealth is disappearing. What should I do?" Mzikibwe looked at Jabari with a mixture of pity and sternness. "You have forgotten the spirit of Ubuntu," he said. "You have turned your back on your fellow human beings, and now the ancestors are calling you to account. If you wish to save yourself, you must make amends." "How?" Jabari asked, desperation in his voice. "You must feed the hungry," Mzikibwe replied. Open your granaries to the villagers and the travelers who pass through. Share your wealth, not out of fear, but out of love and compassion. Only then will the spirits forgive you. Jabari hesitated. The thought of giving away his hard-earned wealth pained him. But the whispers still echoed in his mind, and the stench of rot filled his nostrils. He had no choice. That very day, he opened his granaries and called the villagers to come and take what they needed. At first, they were hesitant, unsure if this was another one of Jabari's cruel tricks. But when they saw the sincerity in his eyes, they came forward, filling their baskets with millet and their hearts with gratitude. Jabari also set up a fire in the center of the village and roasted his finest goat, inviting everyone to share in the feast. Travelers passing through were welcomed with open arms, their hunger eased by Jabari's generosity. As the days passed, the whispers began to fade, replaced by the laughter and songs of the villagers. The stench of rot disappeared, and Jabari's cattle grew strong once more. But the greatest change was in Jabari himself. He no longer saw his wealth as something to hoard, but as a gift to be shared. He became a pillar of the community, known not for his riches, but for his kindness. And whenever the wind whispered through the village, it carried not the voices of the hungry, but the blessings of those he had helped. The villagers say that to this day, the wind still whispers in Kijiji, a reminder of the spirit of Ubuntu and the power of compassion. And if you listen closely, you might hear it calling your name, urging you to share what you have with those in need. For in the end, it is not what we keep, but what we give that defines our true wealth.